Smisha Àdhamh Ó Broin, San na Mungers, na Gaeltach, me, is alla bin is eeren, me nam Gael, agus hoek me Gaelic, my goed chlonje, van a Gael and a vor akamara. Being brought up between Argyll and Glasgow and being thought of by Glaswegians as a Tuchter, as a Highlander, and being thought of by Highlanders as a Glaswegian, you know, and nobody wanted to take responsibility for this person here, you know, sort of like, you know. I went back home just by chance to Cowell for the first time in 10 years and felt this terrible sort of homesickness, what we call Ciarnalis in Gaelic, which is a mixture of nostalgia and homesickness all rolled into one. And I just felt this real draw back to the area, and that I wanted the language of that area to receive the respect that it deserved, because it had been basically forgotten and had almost disappeared out of existence. Initially I just started like anyone else. I found a class, got stuck into that once a week. I purchased every single book that was ever written about learning the language, devoured it cover to cover. When I began to revive the dialect of Central Argyll, it didn't have a name, so we called it Dalriada Gaelic, or Gaelic Argyllshire, because the area, the sea kingdom known as Dalriada, had its centre at Dunad, which was also the centre of the dialect area. So I just tracked down every single old person I could find who was born and bred in the area, and recorded most of them at great length. And the idea was to make all of the lore, stories, songs, culture available.
More tree here, Leon.
Because I was going to sleep every night with headphones on, listening to recordings of old people. There was a time where I could recite word for word huge swathes of these conversations, because I realised if I was going to raise my children with this dialect, which I did from the year dot, I was not only going to have to learn the language, I was going to have to learn the mannerisms. Sometimes we'll lie at night and I'll just recite proverbs to them and see if they can work out the meaning, you know, which is something that Gaels did round the fire for generations. There had been a perfectly good way of transmitting language since the dawn of human history, transmitting it from parent to child. If you're going to revive a language, there's no point in taking a thistle and planting it in the desert. It's not going to take. And what's happening at the moment is that Gaelic language is being planted in an English language desert, and they're expecting it to grow, and it's not grown, and they're wondering why. There's not a Gael alive who doesn't speak English fluently anyway, so we don't need another language to do that. We need another language to offer an alternative to globalised culture. We need cultural resilience. Gaelic medium schools have been, in some ways, a great success story, but they don't use it. They don't use it amongst each other. They don't use it to express themselves in terms of their innermost feelings, because they're not capable. They've never reached the level of language whereby once they get angry they could express themselves in the language, or they feel extreme love or passion or anything. Once they reach adulthood, they're not going to be able to express these things in that language, so it will never become their first language. And the problem is that what you end up with is essentially an English language globalised cake with just a spread of Gaelic icing over the top of it. I believe that you're therefore then not resilient to any of the more negative forces in the world that come with the whitewashing of culture, that come with globalisation. There are lots of wonderful things about globalisation which mean that Indigenous peoples now are able to communicate with one another across the world, you know, and we have English to do that, which is a marvellous thing. We have a common language, so we've got a method of communicating with one another, which is brilliant. But if you lose your home culture, or you've not found a way to reintroduce it, then you are essentially open just to being buffeted by the forces of the globalised world, because you are a member constituent of that language community and you don't have an anchor in your own culture. No matter how assailed they may feel as English speakers in this modern world, just sort of washed along with the tide, then they've always got their Gaelic rock that they can climb up on, and they can say, Isaac Lan, Àdhamh Ó Broin. I know clean, I know perfectly well where my people are from. And that's a great thing to be able to have. and it's immutable. People spend too much time casting off responsibility and saying, well, why should I bother when the government does nothing? Well, the government is only going to implement things that have sprung from the settled will of the people. And if the people aren't willing to take personal responsibility for change, then the government is essentially just a heavy head on a narrow stalk. I think it's very, very difficult for Scots to fully take responsibility for their own culture when they don't have full responsibility for their own country. So I think culture will take on a much more important role post-independence. For me, there is no greater poverty than to not be able to communicate with your grandparents in their own language. Do you remember some of the lovely expressions they used to use? Adopt them, start using them. Indigenous peoples from around the world have different ways of thinking. I don't remember ever having come across a way of saying that you own something. There's no concept of ownership. You would say, "San lom sashin," you know, "'tis with me that is." Or you might say, "Ha Gaelic acum." A Gaelic acum is quite literally, Gaelic is at me. So it's present in my space, you know, but you don't own it. You don't own the cup, you don't own Gaelic. Back in the day, you had what was called dúchas, which is a nativity. It's a sense of belonging and connection to the place that your people are from. And therefore, building a house there was the most natural thing. You know, I need to get planning permission for this. Well, my people have always been from here. I mean, there's only been one fully Gaelic feature film. It was great, in fact, Sheach, the Inaccessible Pinnacle, a great wee film. But there's only been one. So we are one of those. Obviously, we've got BBC Àdhamh, which is the channel, which produces a fair amount of half-decent content. Radio Gael, which is the radio station, is very strong. And the traditional music scene is tremendous. That's been the one absolute success story. There are actually, I mean, there's lots of resources now. When I think about 20 years ago, when I was getting started in the language and just going, oh, this is quite a task, isn't it, you know? There's now a great wee website, it's called learngaelic.scot, and you can go in there and get all the basics. A lovely interactive site. The whole of the series, Speaking Our Language, is free. Use your tablet to investigate the net, see what's on YouTube in terms of stories, documentaries, histories about where your people come from or people that you're interested in. Or you might be able to support somebody else in their venture. It could be financially, it could be moral support, it could be actual physical volunteering to help people make headway for their cultures. There's so many things that you can do. This idea that Gaelic is a passport back to a primordial past, as well as being a fantastic alternative expression for the future, which gives us an alternative to English, where we can say different things, we can feel different things, we can express different things. We can offer hope for diversity culturally.